Well, we're going to start, and together we're going to figure out the judges. I'm going to need your help. I suggested this class, and before I went back and reread Judges, then I went back and read it, and I'm going to need your help. So we're going to explore this together. I think we've got a lot we can learn. Did we run out of handouts? Okay. Oh, thank you, Danny. Thank you, Danny. Well, everybody, needs their own personal handout because you might want to write something down or not, either way. Before we start, I want to say that Michelle's a tough act to follow. She did a fabulous job. Yes, she did. No, God's a hard act to follow. Well, and fortunately, he's following. Yeah, exactly. So I learned a lot about the words in the text that I just glossed over before. And once I knew what the word was there, it was richer and more wonderful. And she also helped me learn how to pray better. So it was good. So we're going to do a nod to Michelle with our opening prayer. So if you'll join me in prayer. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, who is faithful even when your people are faithless, who is mighty to redeem when your people are weak in every way, who is working to set all things right and inviting us to participate. Teach us your ways, O Lord, as we study your word. Reshape us. Make us holy as you are holy. Amen. More handouts. More handouts. Okay, as we start this study, let me remind you that just because something is recorded in the biblical text does not mean God condones its practice. That's going to be important to remember throughout Judges. Part of the story is our need for God because of our brokenness. And we're going to see a lot of brokenness in this study. Also, remember that judges aren't, when you think about going to court today and seeing a judge, not the same thing. The judges in the biblical text are leaders, basically. Sometimes they help make decisions, help people know what's right, but they're leaders. They're not magistrates, for example, primarily. So that's important to remember. Another thing that I want to say on the front end is I'm going to be using multiple translations, multiple versions of the Bible, because I'm picking the ones that I think are best suited for our discussion. And so I'll try to tell you which ones are which as we go. Also, because the material is as unflinching as it is, I'm choosing the versions that I can read in class without blushing. So just know, I'm going to pick and choose the version I can read without blushing or gagging. Also, I wanted to say up front, I didn't bring my stack of resources. When I do a lesson on Zoom, I'll hold them up and show them to you. I was not going to haul the whole lot of them down here because on my desk, they're like stacked up. And so I will show them to you on Zoom at some point. So I gave you a handout, and the one side of it shows what we're going to talk about in the second part of the lesson. On the back side, there is what looks like nonsense. Turn it sideways so that you have the dots down the side. We are going to situate the period of the judges biblically, where it fits in the overall biblical story, geographically on the map, and historically, where it fits in with historical things. So if you want to make notes, make notes. If you don't. It's no big deal. But the 5 dots, the 25 dots down the side, if you're going to make notes, write small, because the other part of it is the map. And you're going to want, if you're making notes, to write on the map. So don't extend your 25 dots into the map. All right, now I think we're ready to start. So, situated in the biblical story. Now, this is just the Karen Strong version of the biblical story. This is not scientific or vetted by anyone. This is just the way I think about it. But I think it helps us understand. Okay, so the biblical story starts with creation. And then we might say, well, Noah comes along there. And then Abraham comes along. Then you get Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, right? You tracking with me? This is a biblical story, the way it unfolds, just words to help jog your memory of what's going on. Okay. So after Joseph, well, that's when you get the 12 tribes, right? 12 tribes. After Joseph, then you get Moses and the Exodus. Then you get law. Then you get wilderness wanderings. Then Moses dies, right? You get Joshua. Then, ta-da, Judges. And then after Judges, you get the monarchy, you get the kings. Who knows the name of the first king? Very good, very good, very good. Saul, David, Solomon. Under David and Solomon, the golden age of the kingdom, period of the monarchy, divided kingdom, right? Are y'all still tracking with me? Okay. Then you get the fall of the north to Assyria. Remember that? That brutal, sort of scary kingdom up north. Then you get the fall of the south to who? Babylonians. Then you get the rise of Persia. That's when they get to return. You get the post-exilic period that we talked about last year. Then you get Greeks. Then you get Romans. Not the letter to the Romans, but the empire of the Romans. Then you get Jesus. And then you get the church. It's the sweep of the biblical story. And here's where Judges is. Okay. Everybody good with that? Was that silly? Okay. Just think through the Bible and remember how they go. So we're going to be talking about this period right here after the death of Joshua and before the first king. The historians don't know how to date it because most of them say anything further back than about 1000 BC, they can't be very sure of. Between now and 1000 BC, they can kind of get it because there's enough data and there's, astronomical cues that there was an eclipse. And so, they can pretty well date back to 1000, maybe time of David, 1000 BC, but Judges, they can't do it very well. They say maybe it was 1375-ish BC to about 1050-ish BC. 300 to 350 years, about 1300 to about 1000, somewhere in there. That's going to be important in a minute. Okay. Questions? Clarifications? 1375 BC to about 1050 BC. Okay. It's where we are biblically. Geographically. If you haven't guessed, this is the Mediterranean Sea. This is the land of Israel, Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. Yes. Okay. Mediterranean, land, Sea of Galilee, Jordan, Mediterranean. Turkey, Egypt. Okay. All right. So Joshua leads the children of Israel into the promised land. The promised land is all around this area, right? This is the promised land. Problem is, there's already people there. Folks live there. Canaanites. So, Canaanites. I don't know if I'm spelling this right, but it's close. Canaanites. The powers, the powerful kingdoms at this beginning date are the Hittite nation, which is a fascinating group because until the 1800s, the only way anybody knew about them was in the Bible. There was no evidence for them at all. Their whole civilization was so totally wiped out that there was no memory of them. And it was only in the 1800s when an archaeologist stumbled onto the ruins that, oh, well, there was a group named the Hittites. And it wasn't until 1923, when Turkey became an independent nation, that the archaeologists really got in there and began to learn about it. And they found a wealth of written information in the ruins. And now they know all this stuff about the Hittite nation, which was invisible before, but completely supports what we find in Judges, which is interesting. The Hittites are known for their use of iron, right? Over in Greece, over here, there's the Mycenaean. It's funny how you can't spell when you're on a board. Mycenaean people group. Over there is also Crete, the Minoan people. Right about here, Cyprus. They had a strong kingdom. There was a shipping trading town here called Ugarit. Talk more about it in a minute. Over here, the Assyrians are growing in power, but they're not dominant yet. Babylon is over here. Egypt down here. And there was, this long ago, there was a strong trade among these people groups. Assyrians, Hittites, Mycenaeans, Crete, Cyprus, Egypt, Babylon even. There was a strong trading group. And Ugarit was where the Silk Road ended and everything got on ships and went out. So this was a very wealthy city. What else do I need to tell you about this? Laying the groundwork. I think that's everything. Okay. So these were the big powers. Now, this time period also coincides perfectly with the collapse of the Bronze Age. Okay, we're moving from geographical to historical now. When you study ancient civilizations, the collapse of the Bronze Age is a really important marker in the development of societies. After the Bronze Age comes the Iron Age. Bronze was made by combining copper and tin. 10 parts copper, 1 part tin. The only place they knew to get tin was in Afghanistan, over there. And so they would come across the trade routes to the trade center, and then they would ship the tin, and that's how they could make their bronze. So it was critically important for everybody to have this network so that the nations could maintain themselves against each other. They also traded all kinds of stuff. Like there's evidence that the Egyptian Pharaoh asked some of the Minoans in Crete to come and paint on one of their pyramids. And there's Minoan paintings on Egyptian pyramids, which is interesting. There's also documentation about them recruiting doctors. You know, a king would need help and would ask for a doctor from another place. So there was a lot of trade going on. But in the archaeological record, during this time period, there was a period of about 50 years where all of these nations either disappeared or were greatly reduced in power. Ugarit completely was wiped off the map. The Hittites were wiped off the map. The Mycenaeans were wiped off the map. The Minoans in Crete were reduced in power. Cyprus was decimated, almost nothing. And Egypt went into its weakest period ever. And for a long time, nobody really knows what happened. 50-year period, all this happened. And when you dig down, there's this layer of ash where these places were burned into extinction. So what happened? Lots of theories. One theory is called the Sea People. Hordes of people who came on ships by surprise, attacked and destroyed. In fact, one of the Egyptian pharaohs, Ramses II, notes on one of his walls the story of the Sea People coming and how he devised a plan because they had wiped out everybody else and they were coming for him next. And so he laid a trap on the Nile River so that when they sailed into the Nile River, they were ambushed. And that's how the Egyptians protected themselves. And the reason they lived through it. The Assyrians just withdrew. The Babylonians just withdrew, got far enough away they couldn't be reached. This is the setting for what's happening here. And this is why there's no world power attacking during this time. There are only regional skirmishes going on through the book of Judges. And so we get Moab, we can write them down, Moab and Aram and the Philistines. And the Ammonites, the Edomites. I mean, we can talk more specifically about where they are later, but we just have regional wars through the period of the Judges. We don't have a nation taking over. Okay. We did, biblically, we did. Geographically, we did. Historically. Comments? Questions? Rebuttals? Oh, the sea people. Well, yes, I did all the rabbit trails. Well, that's one of the theories. The theory that I like best out of all the theories is there's also recorded at this time a tremendous impact on the climate. They can tell that there was great famines. There were, changes in what plants were growing. There was evidence of great starvation and deprivation. And they've tied it to a volcano eruption in Iceland that affected all of the Mediterranean area for almost 20 years. And one of the theories is that the refugees from those areas that had no food desperately went into the sea and began attacking. And because the Egyptian hieroglyphics show the sea peoples as being different people groups, they're not all alike. So that's the theory that I thought was interesting, that it was people who were driven to dire solutions that were invading. By the way, some of the leftover sea people were the ones that, after the battle in Egypt, settled on the coast, and those are the Philistines. So you get very aggressive, powerful people, and then you'll see when we study Philistines, they are still aggressive, powerful people. Yes.
The Hittite influence came into the northern half, and the Egyptian influence came into the southern half, and so they were already in conflict, and that affected. Oh, there it is on. Okay, that affected the Canaanite peoples as well, although that was more of an influence a little bit later.
We're going to see that. The Hittite influence and their use of iron. Now, everybody was using iron. It was just the Hittites were better at it than everybody else. And so people have been using iron for a long time because they could just take meteorites and make iron out of them. And so they were used for religious artifacts because they were magnetic. But anyway, so yeah, the Hittite influence from the north and the Egyptian influence from the south is going to come into play when we're talking about the period of the Judges. We're going to see chariots, enemies have chariots, and those would have been chariots with iron coverings on the wheels. And, the children of Israel do not have chariots. So we'll talk about that. Okay. I think I said everything I wanted to say there. Well, no, I didn't. I could talk for days, but I think we're going to stop there. Okay, so open the book of Judges. We've got the setting of the period of the Judges. And when we get to the book of Judges, you're going to find it's divided into three parts. The first part, the prologue, has two sort of summary introductions in the first part. The middle part is all the stories about the judges. And then the epilogue at the end has two distinct stories at the end. So that's the structure of the book. These stories would have been passed down, oral tradition, you know, about the judges, the heroes. I mean, these are the Avengers of their day, right? They're larger than life characters and amazing stories. Those stories would have been passed down and eventually written down. We know that the priests very often were in charge of making the records of what was going on. They would have the records of who was related to who, you know, all the genealogies, all the information about the law, all, you know, all of the leaders through the ages. The priests documented those things. Probably Samuel pulled all of this together for the first time, but, you know, was probably gathered because everything's on scrolls, right? You don't have books. There's just random scrolls, bits of information that they're pulling together here. So when we look at the introductory part of Joshua, we see these two distinct introductory segments. The first one is chapter 1, and it kind of gives an overview of Judges looking back, you know, the setup for this. It says, after the death of Joshua, the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? And the Lord said, Judah. And so Judah gets Simeon to help him, and they go fight on behalf of the Lord, and the Lord's with them. And they defeat this king called Adoni-Bezek. Adoni, remember, king, leader of Bezek. He fled, but they pursued him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and his big toes. Okay, this is a gentle introduction to the book of Judges. Why do you think they cut off the thumbs and the big toes of this man? Yeah, he was no longer able to fight. He couldn't be a soldier. He couldn't, there was no pulling back the bow, you know. You know, and you probably can't walk very well. You hobble around, and you can't be a soldier. And so then in verse 7, it says, Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has repaid me. They brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. This is a very brutal period in history. Very, very brutal and violent. The people are at the mercy of whoever was stronger than they were. There were some walled cities. I mean, we know Jericho was walled. There were several walled cities in the area, you know, so they weren't just unable to do anything at this period in time. They're building cities and they're building fortresses. And so, you know, some of the people have wherewithal to protect themselves. But the children of Israel coming into this area are, I mean, they're coming in flat-footed with nothing, you know? And not only that, they're coming into a land where they're going to be expected to be farmers, and they're nomads. They don't know what they're doing. So here we go. into the land. And all through Joshua, they're conquering and following God and doing what God tells them. The problem is that once they get into the land, the people they've driven out of the land come back and want to take it back. So it's not a one and done kind of thing. It's a constant battle to try to clear out the land. Okay, so then we get the story, about Judah going up against Jerusalem, and then we get them going against the inhabitants of Debir. We get a little story about Caleb saying he'll give his daughter to whoever can destroy this town, Kiriath Sefer. And Caleb's younger brother, Othniel, does it, wins the bride. And we'll talk more about that next week because Othniel's going to turn out to be the first judge. Spoiler. Then the rest of this first introduction starts talking about how they're suddenly not able to drive out some of these people. Judah went with Simeon, his brother, and they defeated the Canaanites. This is verse 17, who inhabited Zephath and devoted it to destruction. Judah also captured Gaza and its territory, and Ashkelon, that's one of the Philistine cities, and Ekron, another one of the Philistine cities. The Lord was with Judah. He took possession of the hill country, but he could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain because they had chariots of iron, as we said earlier. Now, Robert Alter is one of my favorite Hebrew scholars, and he says the words there for could not drive out are difficult Hebrew to translate. And if you notice in the verses that follow, it's not could not drive out, it's did not drive out. Verse 21, the people of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites. And then further down, 27, Manasseh did not drive out. Verse 29, Ephraim did not drive out. 30, Zebulun did not drive out. Asher did not drive out. 33, Naphtali did not drive out. All the way through the rest of the chapter, they did not drive out. And apparently what happened was once they got into the land, the 12 tribes quit working together, quit supporting each other, and on their own failed to drive people out of the land. And so what happens is then all of those influences are left in the land. The little story we skipped over, verse 22, the house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph scouted out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, please show us the way into the city, and we will deal kindly with you. Way into the city is, from what I've read, many of the cities had secret entrances. They were walled or they were in geologic formations where you couldn't get to them, and there was a secret entrance. So rather than building a big wall with a gate, they would build a hidden area into the city. And so what they were apparently asking this man was to show them the secret entrance into the city. So he showed them the way into the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword, but they let the man go, all of his family go. And the man went to the land of the Hittites and built a city and called it Luz. That's the name to this day. So here's a mention of the Hittites, who for a long time nobody knew who they were, but now we know. Okay, so that is the first introduction, and it's looking back. It's looking back and saying, after the death of Joshua, here's what happened, and they didn't drive out the people. I think we're going to go ahead and do the second introductory piece. This is in chapter 2 and goes into the beginning of chapter 3. And this says, look at this introductory language here. Now, the angel of the Lord, remember that is by many people thought to be pre-incarnate Christ, although we don't really know. But the angel of the Lord often speaks for God and acts as God. So the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochum, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I swore to give to your fathers. I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land. You shall break down their altars, but you've not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your side, and their gods shall be snares to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept, and they called the name of the place Bochum, which means weeping, and they sacrificed to the Lord. Okay, this is the foreshadowing. This is what we're going to see happening all the way through the book of Judges. One interesting thing, Robert Alter, my Hebrew expert, where it says they shall become thorns in your side, he says that the original Hebrew really says they shall become thorns and their gods shall be a snare to you. And it made me think about Paul. I wondered if he appropriated this metaphor later. Metaphor. I wonder if Paul, yeah, I know, metaphor. It's, when you grew up in West Texas, it's a metaphor. So then you get the story of the death of Joshua. This is a flashback. Joshua dismissed the people, and the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done. So as long as there was someone around who had seen what God had done for them and could testify to it, they followed God. Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years, and they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gash. And all the generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. This is when the background music ramps up. You know, this is the dun, dun, dun. So we're going to stop with that titillating inference of what's about to occur. This cliffhanger, that's exactly right, with this cliffhanger. And the stage is set, and we're going to see a heart-wrenching, very blatant description of what happens when people stray from God. And I mean, this is a cautionary tale for sure. This isn't a tale isolated to the collapse of the Bronze Age. This is a story about human nature that is consistent and repeated through history. And in this case, we're going to learn just what happens when you go off and do it your own way. And so we'll have more discussion in coming weeks, but today we needed to set the stage. So thank you for being patient through all of that. And I'll see you next week. I'm hoping to be here again next week in person. Yeah.